Is Final Fantasy XVI bombing in Japan? Famitsu has reportedly reported a 90% drop in sales figures for the physical copy of Final Fantasy XVI in Japan from week 1 to week 2. Now that figure sounds over the top and it sounds cataclysmic without the proper nuance. So let's go into it, shall we? Let us don our monocles and adorn our top hats and break down this investigation and see what's really the truth behind Final Fantasy XVI sales figures. Well, right off the bat, it's quite imperative to attach some context and nuance to this conversation. These numbers are only the physical sales in Japan. And funnily enough, 7 Remake and Final Fantasy XV both experience similar rates of decline for their sales figures going from week 1 to week 2. And I'll leave a link in the description down below to a Game Rant article about this that goes into a bit more detail about the numbers. Now, if you've seen my Final Fantasy XVI coverage before, you would know that I'm very optimistic and happy with the state of Final Fantasy XVI. I love the game. I haven't finished it yet. The PlayStation homepage says I'm about 78% of the way through the main story, and if the game can stick the landing, it will almost certainly end up being my game of the year. That's how much I enjoy the game, and I enjoyed so much that it very well may end up as one of my favorite Final Fantasy games ever. I enjoy Final Fantasy XVI so much, but it was always inevitable that the game was going to sell less than the last 2 main entries in the Final Fantasy franchise. Now, why is that? Well, for a few very simple reasons. One, compared to the last 2 games, Final Fantasy XV and 7 Remake, 16 has a price hike. It's $70 now, not $60. Inconsequential to some, but not to others. Also, 7 Remake and 15 released on consoles that had far larger install bases than Final Fantasy XVI. 16 is a PlayStation 5 exclusive, and the amount of people that have a PS5 is less than those who had a PS4, or in the case of an Xbox One and PlayStation 4 for Final Fantasy XV. Remember, that game was multi-platform, with an eventual PC port. 7 Remake was also just a PlayStation exclusive on launch, however, bear in mind it was a PS4 exclusive, and the install base for PlayStation 4 was bigger than that of the PlayStation 5, because PS5 has had supply issues since its launch, and it's only recently started to clear that up. So it was always inevitable, and obvious to me at least, that it was going to sell less, despite how excellent of a product that I think it is. And also, the numbers coming out of that Famitsu reporting are only the physical copies in Japan. It's important to bear in mind that is not necessarily representative of the entire sales figures as a whole. Digital games are on a massive rise within the last few years. And also, we do have another statistic. 3 days after Final Fantasy XVI released, they announced on Twitter that the game had sold roughly 3 million copies worldwide. Now, I believe 15 had sold 5 million in a day, and 7 Remake sold about 3.5 million in 3 days. So it's more in line with the performance of 7 Remake. But considering that Final Fantasy XVI is on a console exclusively that has a smaller install base, I personally think that's good to see. However, I am not Square Enix, and their opinion is really the only one that matters in this scenario, and whether or not they and Sony deem this game to be a financial success. I'm not too worried about Square Enix's numbers, or at least in terms of their money, because I imagine Sony gave them a bag to get this game to be an exclusive for the PlayStation 5. Both Sony and Square Enix should have been cognizant of the fact that going from the last mainline entry 15 that was multi-platform to an exclusive title for 16 was going to have and see a drop in sales numbers. That should have been obvious to them, and they should have expected that. They probably almost certainly did. I also have to imagine that the numbers will pick up for Final Fantasy XVI from word of mouth, inevitable discounts on sales, and then the PC port that will come in about a year or so on top of the inevitable DLC that the game will have. Remember, we're not even in the holiday season yet, but I feel like a lot of the times when people hyper-focus on the numbers of sales that a game does in particular, a lot of the attention is misdirected to try and justify either a purchase or to justify not purchasing a title. Peer pressure is a very real thing, and people do not like feeling like they've been left out of something really good, and it's easier to like something if a lot of other people like the same thing, because you can use those other people's opinions as a internal justification for your own preferences, opinions, and purchase. So a lot of the times, especially in years with great games that release, an inevitable Game of the Year discussion ensues, people dig their trenches and battle lines and treat these games or these consoles like they're a local sports team that they have to ride or die for. And sure, the banter can be entertaining from time to time, I agree. My main argument is, don't use the sales numbers as a justification for your opinions. Whether or not you like or dislike a game should not be predicated on how much that game sells. In my opinion, it should be focused and predicated on your own personal experiences and opinions in regards to that product. Because a game is not a sports team. It is not your hometown team. It is a product, a good, that is being sold or was sold to you as a good, for you to consume as a consumer. This isn't Genshin Impact, where the developers will give you a bunch of gacha coins if the game does well at the Game Awards. I highly enjoy Final Fantasy XVI, either way it sells. If it sells very well, or if it ends up underperforming. I love the game. I love it so much that it will almost certainly be my game of the year, and if the game can stick the landing, almost certainly end up being one of my favorite Final Fantasies ever made. I love the game, however I also love other games that came out this year, like Tears of the Kingdom. I think they're both great games, and I don't feel the need to put one down to prop up the other. And the fact of the matter is that those numbers we have for the sales of Final Fantasy XVI don't tell us all that much. It's hard to draw conclusions based on that very limited and precise data set. Physical copies in the year 2023, solely in Japan, for a franchise that has seen a lot of its success come from outside of Japan. Now, maybe the Japanese sales figures are representative of the whole, but they aren't necessarily. There could be unique factors in play here for that specific region and for that specific dataset. The fact of the matter is we just don't know right now. What we do know is that Final Fantasy XVI sold about 3 million copies in 3 days, and I believe 7 Remake sold about 3.5 in roughly the same time frame, but with a much larger install base, while also riding off the coattails of the success train that is Final Fantasy VII. So to me, seeing 16 sell that well should be a sign of optimism. But what the shareholders over at Sony and Square Enix think, well, that may be a mystery that is revealed to us one day, but we don't have enough information right now to draw many conclusions as to what they deem a failure or not. Now, for me, the interesting thing to predict here is the future of Final Fantasy XVII. But I feel like in order to really ascertain 16's success, and if the future of the franchise will be based on the ideas and philosophies 16 has introduced to the series, in terms of its gameplay and storytelling, we may have to wait about a year, if not more, for the PC version to drop, and see what the general sentiment and sales figures are then. Now, I've said this before, I think there's a place for both the turn-based era for Final Fantasy and this new action RPG, not action RPG, but real-time action RPG style to coexist for Final Fantasy. I think it would be smart for them to remove the number from the mainline entries going forward. I imagine they're probably tired of having to explain and have it explained to other people that you do not need to play the other Final Fantasies to understand the newest one just because the game has a 16 in the name. And I feel like the title, like the number there specifically, is doing more harm than good now. So yeah, in conclusion, I think the important and smart thing to do is to take a step back, form your own opinions about Final Fantasy XVI, and wait for more data to come in regards to Final Fantasy XVI before latching on to very reactionary, immediate, and nuanced information and takes about the game. Take a step back, experience the game for yourself or not, form your own opinions, and once we have more data and more time has elapsed, we can see where all the pieces lie on the board from there, and where the potential future of the franchise lies. So I'm gonna call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe. Have a great day. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you liked the video and you want to see more content. I know I would appreciate it. And hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload and stream in the future. Leave a comment down below with 2 things. 1, your opinion of Final Fantasy 16. Did you like it? Did you not like it? I want to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. And where do you think the franchise will go from here? Do you think they'll keep the numbers? Do you think they'll drop them? Do you think they'll go back to turn-based? Do you think they'll try and iterate on this combat system one more time or try something new? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. Stay safe. Have a great day. Go play some video games if you can. And as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.